Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and you want to know about how we're helping other accredited investors keep more of their income, go to firstgencp.com/going long.
It's nice to have someone that is complementary to you. My first business partner and I that created the course, we're almost the same person. We have the same strengths, but we have the same weaknesses. We had a third partner, which is very dissimilar to us. But we have a rule that all three of us have to agree for us to move forward on a big deal. And that's helped us so many times, you know.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yep, I'm your host, Billy Keels. We're back once again. We got another really, really awesome conversation. Literally get your pens and paper out, or digital pens and paper, or whatever it is, because today is going to be really, really cool. But really quickly, you know I love to say it. Thank you so much for continuing to tag us, share across social media, the Going Long podcast. We really, really appreciate that because it attracts more people to the podcast family, and something we really, really appreciate that. And you know what? If you want to leave your honest written review and you've still been thinking about it, there's this really short video, Apple Podcast platform, Spotify. Feel free to do that. And if you're looking for any of the previous episodes, just go to firstgencp.com/podcast. Once again, that's firstgencp.com/podcast, and you can find every single episode ever. So listen to this. So if you are someone who is, you know that you have you're a multi-talented person. You have also a highly specialized skill set, i.e., you know, you are a high-paid physician and you like doing other things, and you know that you want to be able to create a path to freedom for yourself and for your family. Like, today's a really good conversation because we have a guest that you're going to learn from, and he's going to tell you more about how he is able to do the things that he's doing with his company. He was a physician and he's helping a lot of people. We're going to get to the conversation with Dr. Pranay Parikh, and we're going to get to that just after this. Are you a busy, high-paid professional, someone who's made $200,000 the previous 2 years and also expected to earn $200,000 this year? Or maybe as a couple, you filed jointly and you've earned $300,000 the previous 2 years and also expected to earn $300,000 together this year. Or maybe yourself, or as a couple, you have $1 million in net worth, not including your home. Well, if you meet any of those criteria, then the IRS considers you to be someone who is an accredited investor. And so that probably means you're a top producing software sales executive, or maybe you're a highly paid consultant. Maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a doctor or a business owner. You may even work for a professional sports franchise. Well, one way or the other, you've done a lot of really hard work to get to where you are. You've done 100% of the work, and nowadays you're continuing to get crushed by taxes. And that means you're only bringing home 50% of the reward. If you're tired of doing this over and over and you're looking for a solution to start to keep more of your money, you can go to firstgencp.com/invest so that you can start to keep more of your money, which means that you can start to have the freedom to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, with whom you want to do it. So once again, go to firstgencp.com/invest to see how we can start to help you today. Once again, that's firstgencp.com/invest. So if you want to understand how wearing a lot of hats and collaborating with others can be the key to your long distance investing success, then guess what? Today's the conversation you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Because today's guest, not only following his extensive education in medicine, was a nocturnist lead for a healthcare provider in the Midwest, and I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. He is also, and you will find this to be the case, a very multifaceted person. He is a physician, he's an educator, he's the co-creator he's going to tell us about that. I won't steal his thunder. And he is also the co-founder of Ascent Equity Group, as well as the host of the super popular podcast, From MD to Entrepreneur. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Dr. Pranay Parikh. Pranay, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Billy, how's it going?
All's well, man. All's well. Love your energy. Love the pre-conversation. And I cannot wait for the entire Going Long family to find out more about you and your story and how you are going out and adding so much value to others today. Are you ready for this conversation?
Yeah. Let's do it.
I knew you were. Well, listen, here's the thing. Every single one of our guests, and today our special guest, you're going to get at least 5 questions. You're going to get 2 in the beginning. You're going to get 3 in the end, in the middle, you're going to get a lot of questions as well. I just don't know how many there are, so I won't even dare to ask. So, but one of the things is I would love for you to help us understand, where exactly do you call home in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I live in this small city called Echo Park. It's in Los Angeles, California. It's about 2 exits away from downtown, and it's nice because there's a ton of good food here. And my wife and I basically live to eat.
Oh, that's not bad. Not bad. I like living to eat. Sounds like a lot of fun, especially like I live over here in the Mediterranean. So it's like usually a pretty good thing going on.
Little envious about that.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. You all come over and visit and we'll hang out and all that kind of good jazz.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And then also too, one of the things that I really, really enjoy, love is positivity. So can you help us understand what's the most positive thing that's happened to/for you in the last 24 hours?
I think a lot of times you bring positivity in your own life, right? It's how you look about things. So, for example, here in the US, there's a lot of economic turmoil, right? And so we are in real estate, and we thought, hey, this sucks. Like, let's hope everyone's deposits and everyone's doing okay in the banking sector for now, except the bankers. The people are doing okay. But we had to buy something that was very expensive called a rate cap. And it was about $1.5 million yesterday and last week. And we thought it was going to go up to $2 million. But because of this thing happened, we went to our bankers and we said, hey, all this stuff is happening. Can you guys give us a discount? And we don't know the exact price, but it's going to be about half. So we'll have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think a lot of it is just keeping up with the news, trying to be like, hey, is this thing, can it be good for me? And especially if everyone else is going to be okay, like let's try to, so we're going to save money, but mostly it's our investors that are going to save a fortune on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you giving us that perspective, because sometimes it's so easy to get lost in like all the stuff that's going on around that, one of my mentors a long time ago used to say, where there is chaos, there's cash flow. Right. And so when you're looking at it from a different perspective, I mean, you're adding value to so many other people, your investors, because you and your team decided to ask one question amid all the chaos that's happening, at least this point in time, depending on when you're listening to this or watching the video. It may have already gone by, but appreciate you giving us that perspective, Pranay. And so here's another thing. The entire Going Long family knows this about me. I am a recovering perfectionist, so I try to do things that are pretty outlandish sometimes, like tell your entire backstory in 1.5 seconds. Never was going to happen. You've done way too much. You've helped too many people. You've made too much impact. So what I am going to ask you, Pranay, is if you could tell your own backstory in your own words. You can take a lot more time, take as much time as you want. And then when you're telling your backstory, if you could also help us understand what are some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey. And then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Yeah. So I was born in San Jose, California, Silicon Valley. So you'd expect me to go into tech, which I love tech. I actually remember my first computer in the early 90s. I was on the internet on a 28.8 modem. Wow. We had MS-DOS. I was pretty good at it, so I've been really tech friendly. But being from a South Asian family, my dad, of course, wanted me to be a doctor. So that's where I got pushed, and I actually enjoy that. I really like understanding how things work. So medicine was perfect. I mean, what bigger enigma do we have than our human body? So kind of went along that, but I get easily distracted. So, I went through high school and it was actually pretty good because I did a lot of different things. And before you get into med school, they want you to be well-rounded. And I was, because I did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But then I got into college, and when you get in college, they really want like, okay, you got to be pre-med. You can only do medicine. And I was kind of doing a lot of stuff. I was molecular biochemist. I was an ocean microbiologist. I just, I tried different internships, different jobs. And because I was working so much, my studies kind of suffered a little bit. Getting to med school, you got to get straight A's. So, and I had a decent GPA, 3 something, but not like, man, these guys.
Not off the charts.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end, it came time. It was like, what was I going to do? Was I going to take more schooling, right? Get even longer, or get a master's degree, or I could go to school in a different country. And I was like, hey, living in a different country sounds awesome. So I went that. I went to the Caribbean. I went to schooling. It is not the Caribbean you're thinking about. So when I moved there, it's called the Nature Island because it's unadulterated. So that means there'd be a hurricane, power would go out. I'd be studying via flashlight. It wasn't super conducive to studying medicine, but I built a lot of resilience. So then I got into, but it's not a U.S. school, so you don't have that name recognition behind you. So it was a little struggle getting into residency, meaning the next level of training. And I got into a program in Tennessee, just fortunate that I was able to find a program. And it was a university program, so decent. But people could see that I was unhappy. I'm from a big city and I had moved to a very small town. So my senior resident, he was like, why don't you just move back to California? I was like, what, you can do that? And he's like, yeah, go to this website and you can see if there's any availability to transfer. And when people had started in that program, it was kind of third, fourth, fifth choice for a lot of people. So a lot of people were pretty kind of depressed when they got there. They didn't get their top choice. And I made a conscious decision. Hey, it kind of sucks. Like maybe I should have worked harder, but I'm going to kick my butt in gear. So in the very beginning, when you start residency, you take this test. It's called the in-service exam. And it's kind of just there to tell you where you are, right? It doesn't count for anything. And no one studies for it. I was like, okay, no one studies for this. It's going to be really easy for me to stick out. Let me just take this test. And I killed it. I got 98th percentile. Wow. So I was better than 98% of the interns that are out there. And it didn't mean anything. I was like, okay, that's cool. At least now I know it's not me, right? It's not it's more of effort based. It wasn't something intrinsic with me, right? And I found later on when I was checking that website to see if there was any other positions, there was a position open at University of Southern California. That was my dream program, And I applied and they're like, yeah, send us your transcript and all this stuff. And first of all that stuff isn't that great because then I would have got into USC in the first place. But I was like, you know what, guys? I know you didn't ask for this test, but here's this test. I got 98th percentile. And the other thing is my friend was at that program. So I was like, hey, could you put in a good word, right? I didn't talk to her for a while, but I was like, hey, remember we were friends? We were actually neighbors. Yeah. And she put in a good word. That test really stuck out. And long story short, I was able to transfer to USC. And the thing is, this program was way better than any of the programs I had interviewed at. So had I not gone to this lesser program, I wouldn't be at this amazing program. So I did well at USC, but still kind of did a lot of stuff. I worked with the heart doctors. I worked with the sleep doctors, right? And I was trying to do this additional training called fellowship. And they looked at my application when I applied and they're like, yeah, it doesn't look like all you care about is this fellowship. It's like, yeah, you're right. I care about all this other stuff. I care about real estate. I care about all this other stuff. And once again, I didn't get in, and I was like, okay, shoot, like, what do I do now? I was expecting this huge salary and now I have a decent salary. And so I looked around and I had all this debt. So I looked around and that's when I really found real estate. It's like, okay, I could either put money in the stock market, not have access to it for 30 years, right? And all these years I've sacrificed my life. So I bought a 4-unit. And the question is, how did I buy something so expensive in LA? The money has to come from somewhere. I wish I could just say like I bought 4-unit and just so on, but I worked a lot. I worked up to 27 12-hour shifts a month, pay off my loans to buy my 4-unit. And I was like, okay, we'll buy one of those a year, right? And retire in 10 years. But I didn't realize how difficult the market was in Los Angeles. And I just got super lucky with my first one. So I looked around like, is there anything else I can do? Is there any other way to get into real estate? And that's when I found syndications. So, but I realized like it's so difficult to find syndication. We didn't have podcasts like yours. I know you've talked about it in the past, but syndications wasn't really like well known back in like 2015, 2016, you know? And so I partnered with someone. We created a course, and we've had thousands of people take the course and learn how to find deals, vet them, and invest. And after a while, people went through our course. They're like, yeah, okay, now we know this stuff, but we know enough that we don't want to do it. So why don't we just invest in the same deals you two, my partner and I, are investing in? Maybe we can get better terms, better deals. So we did that. We created a Cent equity group. We got small pieces of very large deals, but over time, we had enough interest that we could take down whole deals by ourselves.
Well, and so listening to your, being able to take down the deals by yourself, meaning you and your partner with groups of investors, and you think about that all the way, the things that you told us from the very beginning, like, hey, listen, you were following a path because, from your family origins, the thing is what your dad wanted you to do was to become a physician. Not only did you do that, but along the way, you've allowed your natural curiosity to lead you in multiple different directions, taking different paths to get to now where you're continuing to serve others. And so as I think about that, there's a part of your story that you mentioned sometimes, and this happens to me a lot, but for those of you that are recovering perfectionists, this will sound like a lot, because you mentioned you didn't just kind of have a failure event once, you had like twice, because you talked about the fellowship. Talk to that person who's the working professional that's kind of like, hey, listen, I want to get out there. I really want to make sure that I get the next raise or the next role or the next title. And you get that kind of knockback, not just once or twice. Sometimes that can affect the way that you continue to perceive yourself or your ability to move forward, because you went through that yourself and you're still continuing to come out on top. Maybe talk to us a little bit about how you were able to do that.
Yeah, a lot of therapy. I wish I could be like, hey, failure is great, right? And now I look at it that way, right? It's a learning experience. It's finding your path, right? If you imagine there's 10 doors and one has your success, you pick one door and it's nothing. You're like, okay, now my chance of getting the next door is even higher, right? It's 1 out of 9, 1 out of 8, and so on. But it sucks, right? It sucks being rejected. It sucks being rejected by your spouse or your significant other, your work, your family. Having to have that discussion with people. It wasn't easy to tell my parents that I didn't get fellowship. And actually, Billy, twice. I applied twice and I didn't get in. So the second time was less painful, but I also made the decision. I went to some interviews, but I got an interview in Fresno, for example, which is in the middle of California. I was like, yeah, I'm okay not getting this position if it means I don't have to live in Fresno for 3 years. And that's a conscious decision I made. But I think you have to look at failure differently, right? So first, how it feels viscerally, right? So before you even think about the success and all that stuff, failure is temporary, right? It feels like it's going to be forever, right? Failure doesn't say anything about you. It's not intrinsic. It's not pervasive. And it's not permanent, right? It's temporary. And it's not, it doesn't mean it's going to happen again. So if you look at failure as not something that's part of you, it's just a moment in time, then you're almost able to kind of separate yourself from the failure. Because what happens is you connect the two, right? You're like, or like a breakup, you're like, I could never be loved again, right? Or I'll never find someone that I can love again, right? And it feels so much bigger than yourself. So just remembering that, and it's almost like a mantra, and you have to tell yourself that, even if you don't feel it, even if it feels like it's going to be forever, right? If you think about those breakups where for like 2 weeks, you're like, oh, this is the worst feeling in the world, right? And then like week 3, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad, right? It's just getting through that period. And what I think is the most important is knowing that there's going to be setbacks. So, the podcast is From MD to Entrepreneur. So I try to really be like, hey, this is tough, right? So Billy, you've had, 300 plus episodes, super successful. But like, if I told you right in the beginning, I'm like, Billy, you're probably going to have like 2 downloads in the first episode. You see 3, you're like, oh,
wow, amazing.
I am the best in the world, you know? Yeah. But if you go like most people where you're like, okay, yeah, I like, okay, like for example, there's 4 people that live in my house. My first episode had 2 downloads. I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, I have more people in this house. Only half of you
listen to my podcast? Yeah. What in the world is going on here? Hang on a second.
Yeah. I was like, don't even have to listen. Just download it, right? Yeah. But it's hard to get that moving, right? And it's progress, right? Action begets hope, and it begets the chance of winning, right? You just want to increase your surface area for luck. So yeah, it sucked, but probably, and now I could say this because I'm looking back, it's the best thing that happened to me. I moved on. I found my business partner because after that happened, I was like, okay, like I had this nice, well-worn path in the future that I can follow, right? Pre-med, medical school, residency, fellowship, and then, you know, some directorship somewhere. Yep. But now it's okay. I was like, now I'm a graduate, I'm a doctor. Now, what do? How do I support my family? How do I pay off my loans? And my salary was good, which I know a lot of your tech people have good salaries, but maybe they have loans or maybe they feel stuck. Yep. So you got to do something else. So I got married, I had kids, and all of that stuff. If I had 3 years of fellowship, it would have just kind of delayed all those plans. So I feel like I'm 3 years in the future for my business and business plan and life. But looking back, it sucked. So I think and then here's one other thing. I gave myself a whole day. I'm like, this whole day I can mope around and just feel like crap. I was like, just walking around, I was like, I suck. I'm the worst, you know, because I think we need that, right? We need that. And if we suppress it, it's going to come out. So I was like, I'm dumb, you know, I was like, I should have said that, you know, ruminating and all that stuff. But then after a day, I was like, okay, got it out of my system, you know. I was like, you gave yourself that period. Yeah, you gave yourself that period of time to say, okay, look, in the next 24 hours, going to go through this. And then afterwards, boom, you got to get back get back into where you were. And so I love the way that you break that down, right? Because one is just a reminder that, hey, listen, even if you're going for that next big role or that next big whatever in your life, if it doesn't happen, it's a moment in time. It's temporary. It's not going to last forever. And then as you make that separation, you also realize like, hey, listen, don't worry. It happened once. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen again. So what you're helping to provide is really that path forward to the person who is, you know, who is looking for that. Trusting that you're enjoying today's conversation. And you know what? If you're tired of getting crushed by taxes and you're looking for greater freedom to be able to choose what you want to do when you want to do it, make sure that you go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. Let's get back to the conversation. I want to come back to, because you kind of like threw it in really easily. And I was like, well, hang on a second. I know people that are watching or running on the treadmill and listening to us is like, hang on a second. But yeah, he talked about all the stuff and the debt and he made all these decisions, but then he just kind of talked about real estate and he decided to do real estate. Well, I did too, but why did you actually decide that real estate, at least initially, because you talked about what you were doing in the stock market and that's the traditional path, right? And so you've got this other thing and you talked about getting into real estate, but what was it that drew your attention, drew your passion, or at least interest, let's say interest initially towards real estate? So I looked around, right? And I thought about who is doing well? Who could I model myself after? And the people that were doing very well were the people that owned a lot of real estate or owned a business, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought owning a business is a lot of work. And let me buy some real estate. That I can figure out. My parents owned real estate. There's 18-year-olds that are killing in real estate. So, I found bigger pockets. I did a lot of research. And my sister-in-law is a real estate agent. So in Los Angeles. So, I had an unfair advantage because I trusted her implicitly to take care of me, So that's why I got into real estate, tax advantage, all the stuff your listeners know. And then eventually I turned the real estate into a business.
Well, and so turning the real estate into a business, I think is one of the things that as you is the path that you've gone on, right? That's one of the many options because you've combined two of the levers that you were initially talking about. But there's like, and you said something like having an unfair advantage. I think I grew up in the way that I grew up is if it was an unfair advantage, it was like by definition, it wasn't cool because you shouldn't do that. But then as you start to realize that there is this game that is played, and I've talked about this multiple times on LinkedIn, like it's understanding, like, when I grew up, there was the phrase that was or the sentence that was, don't hate the player, hate the game. And so, you start to understand the game. But you just said something that was also really interesting, that you'd actually seen the power of real estate because it sounded like, at least I understood you to say that your parents had also invested in real estate. So it was something that you had actually been exposed to at an early on age. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
I think a lot of us are fortunate or unfortunate where and who we're born to. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned, right now he runs an ice cream store, but his background's in electrical engineering. He owned limos, he owned condos, he owned a lot of stuff.
Sounds like there's a lot of some genes that were passed on to you.
Yeah. So they were considering buying a Hallmark store, and they're just all over the place. That's fortunate. I'm from Indian descent, and we're very kind of business oriented. But for a lot of people, they don't have that benefit. So who can you model yourself after? Who can you use as a mentor and look at their life? There's this other podcast that I have no relationship with called Founders Podcast, where he goes through all these biographies. So look at Charles Munger, look at Charlie Munger, look at Warren Buffett, look at Brandon Turner, all these people that you can read their whole story in about 5 to 8 hours and capture what they spent a whole lifetime trying to learn. And so try to see, and I think a lot of people, myself included, look for an alive mentor, right? Someone that can guide you. And those are the best, right? To have someone like that. But don't discount, the mentor that you can have digitally, or the mentor that you can have just from reading their books, because you might learn just as much, if not more, from them.
Yeah, digital mentors are absolutely fantastic as well. So I was going to ask you about your creative gene, but I think you already told us a little bit about that. I think, or at least some of it. But you also chose to take a very specific path, because you've talked about earlier working with a business partner. It's one of the things we talked about in the very beginning. You did something where you're really focused on, being a specialist, a highly educated specialist in the area of medicine. At the same time, you've made this choice to collaborate, and collaboration seems to be one of the things that you are really also passionate about. Talk to us a little bit about why you've chosen that path for collaboration in terms of being able to serve others rather than keeping a focus and being able to do it just yourself as the specialist.
I think things are really interesting when you work with other people. So we have business itself, entrepreneurship is very lonely. I have a whole podcast on this, and even someone like yourself, super successful, 300 plus episodes. But a lot of times you're talking to your editor, you're talking to your social media person, but it's lonely. You don't have that necessarily office feel where you're just talking at the water cooler. And so it's nice to have someone that is complementary to you. So my first business partner and I that created the course, we're almost the same person. We have the same strengths, but we have the same weaknesses. So when we created the Ascent Equity Group, we had a third partner, which is very dissimilar to us. It kind of rounds us out. And it's just so fun. We have these meetings with the three of us, and like we get into very passionate arguments but we have a rule that all three of us have to agree for us to move forward on a big deal. And that's helped us so many times. For example, we were considering a deal in Vegas, and Vegas was super hot in 2021. And right now it's crashing bad. And two of us were gung-ho to get into this deal. And it looked pretty good. And our third partner, we just couldn't convince them. We're like, okay, fine, you win. We're so thankful now to do that, and it's having someone, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2, but it's like a 2 × 2 = 4 kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And being able to find that right mix, right, in terms of the collaboration and being able to have a clear understanding of, what are the ground rules? How do you make decisions and things like that is not something that is very, I'm sure you've had your trials and tribulations, but to your point, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And so it's great to have a clear understanding as to why you've moved into this, the idea of collaboration and how you're also able to help others. Now this, you've got the podcast, right? So from MD to entrepreneur, tell us a little bit about that. What was the reasoning behind doing that, and who are you talking to there?
So I realized that I was having all these super interesting conversations, and I was like, wow, this is so good. And not because of me, but because of them and the kind of education, mentorship, and skills that they were passing along with me. I was like, people need to hear this. And it's one, I want physicians and other people that want to be entrepreneurs to learn, like, hey, here are the skills that you need. So we go through marketing, we go through productivity and all that stuff. But also to hear from these regular people, like, hey, if they've been successful, I can be successful too. Mm-hmm. And it's also following my path, my journey in entrepreneurship, because I'm a little hard-headed. Sometimes I have to make a lot of mistakes to learn my way, And if people can learn and not make the same mistakes and be successful, because what I really feel is, and I don't want people to just be entrepreneurs. I don't want people to leave medicine, but I think that having something outside of medicine will make you a better doctor, will make you more financially secure, and it will just round you out in such a better way and really help with the burnout epidemic that we're having in the U.S.
That's fantastic. So, like I said, from MD to entrepreneur helps us understand a little bit more about the reason for the podcast, who you're looking to help, and also, shed some more light in terms of real life stories, in terms of how you can make transition from point A to point B. As you talked about earlier, it's another way to learn from digital mentors and things like that, which is fantastic. So, here's the thing. I just realized, Pranay, we've got to get to the Going Long Final 3. But the thing is, I never, ever ask any of our guests, and today you're our special guest, I'll never ask any of the Going Long Final 3 unless you let me know that you're ready. So my question for you is, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Why does that not surprise me? I thought you would be like, yeah, man, of course. I was born ready, man. Of course you were. Of course you were. So here's the thing. So we started with you over on the left coast of the U.S. or on the west coast of the U.S., probably a better way to say it. I'd like to bring things back to this side of the pond, because this guy from Columbus, Ohio, who's been doing this podcast for a while, has been living in Europe for the last 22 years. So one of the things that I would love for you to share with the Going Long podcast family is, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
So I'm really much looking forward to going to Paris. I know you lived there for a little bit, but like I said, my wife and I live to eat. And so the best fine dining is in France and in Paris. So our actual plan is probably in a year or two. We were actually going to start in 2020, but to live elsewhere for the summers. But you know what happened in 2020. So hopefully we can start that in a couple of years.
We started this podcast in 2020. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Paris is an amazing place. And it's one of my favorites of all time. It started a whole new life for me. You talked about things that set a path for me forward, and it's just amazing. So we're going to add that to the show notes. And here's the other thing. Like, normally I tell this long story and kind of get to the point, but with you, I'm going to do something different. I'm just going to ask you the question, because we've talked about how you are so multifaceted. You've tried so many things. You've already shared some of us with us earlier, some of the what people would call learning opportunities, or maybe failure event, or whatever. You learned something because you were trying new things. I would love for you to share with us, Pranay, like, what is one, not the mistake that you made or the learning opportunity that you had, but what was the lesson that you learned? Because I'm interested in you sharing another lesson or sharing a lesson from a failure event that you had so that you can help the Going Long family to minimize the probability of having that exact same thing happen.
So I got into crypto last year for fun, and I went a little too all in, and crypto stuff changed, and it just gave me an idea, not necessarily for crypto, but to not put all your eggs in one basket. I should have spent a couple $1,000 just for fun and know that I've lost it. But I saw a good deal, and I was like, "Hey, this is great!" And and it went up. And it went down and went up, and then now it's way down. So I think stuff like that is just have a little bit pre-decided that you're going to use or probably lose, but don't rush to go in and put in more because you have to get this great deal, and especially for something that you're not super knowledgeable about.
Love that you shared that, and I love that last part, right? Especially if you're not knowledgeable, because typically. And I love your perspective on this real quick, and then we'll get to question number 3. But when you lack the knowledge, that increases the risk, right? Because because by definition, you don't know the questions to ask, or you may not have such and such. Do you find that to be the case as well, Pranay? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think so. There's two things, right? There's what is the downside risk. So like something like crypto, where it can go down to zero. Right. Yeah. And that sucks. But like something like real estate, like so when I bought my first 4 unit, I went to the final inspection and we were going through the property. I was like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. Right. And like, I don't know if this is a good inspection. And fortunately, my sister-in-law had warned me like, hey, I told the inspector to find out everything that's bad and just point it out and make it sound horrible. Yeah. And then he gives me the report. I'm like, this place is falling apart, And then he gets me to the side later. He's like, hey, this place actually looks pretty good. I was like, that's not what this paper says.
You started at learning. Yeah, you're learning.
Yeah, but we were able to get a discount, right? So that was the long game, and that's what I understood later. But say I that property sucked. And it was horrible. I could sell it at 70%, 80%, right? I wouldn't lose all my money. So I think taking a risk is a lot more calculated when you're in real estate. But something else like stocks, like individual stocks, like a mutual fund is probably not going to go to zero, but an individual stock did. In my very intelligent genius years, like 2 years ago, I bought some Peloton stock. That was a big mistake.
Well, but it does come back to your point. It's about the education. Do you have the education? Do you have the knowledge, the insight, and is it up to date? Right. I mean, because there are market dynamics. We started at the very beginning of this conversation that are changing. For some people, it will create chaos. For others, it will create opportunity, and a lot of that is based on the amount of education that you have and the network that is around you. And I love the example you just used that you reached out as part of your unfair advantage to be able to learn a lesson so that you are now able to expand that and help so many other people. So I appreciate you going there. And then we got to get to question number 3 because we could talk you and I could talk forever. I think we probably do spend like 15 days. But question number 3 is really about, I love being able to feed our minds before you leave us today, Pranay. And so what is the one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family?
Yeah. So we talked about a little bit about this before, but I find that I listen to a lot of podcasts and I go on a lot of podcasts and same handful of books, right? Atomic Habits, that one thing, right? And so I like to have something that's different. So this book is called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And what it does is it makes words in different languages or that capture the human emotion that a lot of times we're not able to put into words, but once we see that, we're like, exactly. So here's a word called half-wise. It's an adjective. Suddenly aware that you're more than halfway through a vacation or semester or other positive experience, noticeably closer to the end than the beginning, as if someone had flipped your mental hourglass overnight, turning a rush of fun surprises into a trickle of lost hurrahs.
Wow. I like that. Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. So we're going to include that in the show notes. Appreciate you not only sharing, but giving us some insight into the book as well. Pranay, I'm literally, I can't believe how quickly these conversations fly by, right? I mean, you're telling us from the very beginning, the family influence and Indian descent and this desire to have you become a physician. And you talked about that. And not only did you share that, you've talked about your path, right? And it's the path less traveled. And along the way, you continued to use those multifaceted skills that you talked about. And I mean, being able to be in Silicon Valley at the time that you were there, you were able to see it's not just follow this one path. It's how do I gain as much experience as possible along the way? You're leveraging your unfair advantages in the way that is helping others. And you're also able to keep this very unique perspective on where are we in life. I love the example that you used earlier, talking about this is a temporary moment in time. At the same time, being aware of where you are today. And you're doing that in such a way that not only with your podcast are you helping others as a physical digital mentor as well to so many different people, but also with the Sin Equity Group, how you are continuing to collaborate and help add so much value to others. So, I'm going on and on, and the Going Long family is thinking, yeah, Billy, just ask him the question. So here's the thing, Pranay, help us understand what's the best way for the Going Long family to connect with you, find out more about your podcast or the things that you're doing with the Sin Equity Group as well.
Yeah. So my podcast website is FromMD.com. And you can sign up for my newsletter, get weekly productivity tips on there. You can get the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically everywhere. If you're interested in me in investing in the type of real estate that we do, is AscentEquityGroup.com.
All right, fantastic. So SynEquityGroup.com. Also about the podcast, where we'll make links, and so you guys can connect with Pranay and do it in a way that's very, very simple and easy for the two of you to connect. So listen, Pranay, on behalf of the entire Going Long family, just want to say thank you very much for deciding to invest your time with me, with us. And thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Billy.
All right, cool. Pranay, give me like 10 seconds and then we'll wrap things up. Going Long family. I mean, I don't even really know what else to say. I mean, Pranay left everything here for you. He gave you so many actionable tips. I mean, he even read from the book that he recommended to you today. So do me a favor. No, do yourself a favor. Share today's episode. He left you so many different nuggets. Talk to your friends, talk to your family members about the things that you heard about today and go from theory to practice. And then when you get stuck, Pranay's even giving you a way to reach out to him directly. So while you're taking action, because that's really important, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Trust that you enjoyed today's conversation. And once again, today's conversation was sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and want to find out more about how we're helping accredited investors to gain their personal freedom even faster, go to firstgencp.com/going long.